All right, so I'm back with another video today, and what we're doing is we're comparing three fragrances to Absolu Aventus. All right, so the three fragrances that I have here are Game of Spades High Roller from Joe Milano. All right, so this is going to be one of the newer ones that I just recently got in. The other one is one that I've already done a video on here on the channel, and this is Armaux's Club de Nuit Precieux. And then the last fragrance is a fragrance that when it was released here about a month ago or so, it was rumored to be a Absolu Aventus inspiration. So we're going to see if that is actually the case. And this is Versace's Hawas Black. All right. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to kind of compare and go over the Game of Spades High Roller as well as the Club de Nuit Precieux, kind of compare those two to Absolu Aventus first. And then I'll kind of, after that, go over the Hawas Black, all right? Now, if you're not familiar with the notes of Absolu Aventus, the top notes in that fragrance are grapefruit, bergamot, pink pepper, blackcurrant, pineapple, nutmeg, and cloves. In the mid, you have ginger, cinnamon, citron, cardamom, and rose. And then in the base, you have patchouli, vetiver, tonka, ambroxan, evernyl, musk, oak moss, and sandalwood. All right. So in terms of how these two fragrances actually smell when compared to Absolu Aventus, what you're going to get, at least in the initial opening, is the Club de Nuit Precieux is going to be sweeter and fruitier than what Absolu Aventus is. It also is going to be a more sort of richer smell. And overall, I think that this fragrance definitely, it's stronger overall than what Absolu Aventus is. All right. Now for the Joe Milano Game of Spades High Roller, with this fragrance, this is not going to be nearly as sweet and fruity as what the Armaux is, but it's also not as, sweet and fruity as what the original Absolu Aventus is either. So the main things that I sort of pick up on in the Game of Spades High Roller is I get more of like pink pepper, more of like that tart grapefruit, more citron, as well as a lot more sort of cardamom as well. All right. So this one comes off as kind of like more of a fresh, spicy, aromatic, style fragrance. Whereas the original from Creed, it does come off as, like I said, a little bit more fruitier. And also it leans into, I won't say it leans more into the spices, but definitely the spices are more prominent in this fragrance, in the Creed. Now, the Creed overall is just, the blend on it is very good. So what I will say is the blend quality on the Creed, it does beat, both the Club de Nuit Precieux as well as the Joe Milano Game of Spades High Roller. In the Creed, you really don't get any one note over the other. Everything is just blended together really smoothly. And, nothing is really overtaking anything within that fragrance. Whereas with the Armaux Club de Nuit Precieux, you get pineapple, I would say, over just about anything else. Pineapple and blackcurrant. This also does do a good job of like recreating the spices as well in the opening of Absolu Aventus. But in my opinion, the Club de Nuit Precieux it is very sort of fruit heavy, especially with the pineapple in the opening spray. Whereas again, the Game of Spades High Roller, this one it's going to be a lot more heavier on, again, that cardamom note, the citron, the grapefruit, and definitely the pink pepper. All right. Now, once the two fragrances start to dry down, when compared to the Absolu Aventus, then that's when the Game of Spades High Roller actually starts to become a lot closer to the original Creed Absolu Aventus. All right. Now, in the mid and the dry down, I am still getting a little bit more sort of cardamom from this fragrance. So it does come off as being a little bit more kind of like on the fresh, spicy side. But it does become closer to the original than what the Club de Nuit Precieux does. So this one, to me, it still maintains that really sort of, ripe, kind of almost sort of syrupy, sweet sort of pineapple note that you get from the opening. That does kind of carry over into the mid as well. But I do, again, feel like this still comes a little bit closer to the original than what the Club de Nuit Precieux does. This is overall just kind of like more of a sort of more youthful and playful, and I would say maybe for some people an easier to wear version of the Creed. Whereas this, to me, it kind of leans more towards the original sort of scent profile, in terms of how it smells. Now, the other thing to mention here with the Game of Spades High Roller is the strength of this. At least off of my skin anyway, it is definitely going to be double the strength of what the Creed is in terms of how it projects. Now, it's not going to be as strong as what the Club de Nuit Precieux is. This, so far, I would say is, about the strongest one. Now, definitely, I would say the Hawas Black is a little bit stronger than what this is for sure. But if we're talking about just these two, this is going to be stronger than what the Game of Spades High Roller is. All right. So yeah, man, that's the main differences that I get when you get to the dry down. Is the Game of Spades High Roller is going to be heavier to me on the cardamom, as well as I would say like the patchouli and the vetiver. Those seem to be a little bit heavier in the Game of Spades High Roller. Whereas with the Absolu Aventus, I get more cinnamon for sure out of the Absolu Aventus. You can sort of sense the cinnamon kind of like in the background on the Game of Spades High Roller, but it's not as prominent as what it is in the Absolu Aventus. And then also with the Club de Nuit Precieux, it is also more prominent in the Club de Nuit Precieux as well. So this does have, a decent amount of spice to it also, but it just has more of a fruitier vibe more than anything. All right. So in terms of like the performance of the two fragrances, the performance on both are going to be really good. So as far as like the projection on the Game of Spades High Roller, this fragrance is going to project at least about twice as much as what the original Creed does, but it is going to be slightly less than what you get with the Armaf Club de Nuit Precieux. All right, so if Club de Nuit Precieux is going to give you about an arm's length or so of projection for, I would say, normally about like the first hour and a half or so, the Game of Spades High Roller is going to be maybe a couple inches below that. So, I mean, it's not like a super noticeable difference, but I can sort of tell that this does project just a little bit less than what the Club de Nuit Precieux does. And then, I mean, in terms of like the overall longevity, the Club de Nuit Precieux is going to last a little bit longer. That is to be expected. This is an extrait de parfum, and this is a parfum concentration. And then the original Creed is a EDP. All right. So that's kind of how it is, in terms of, the overall longevity. With the Creed, I'm getting like around 7 hours or so of total longevity with this. Whereas with the High Roller, I'm getting like around 10 plus hours. And then with the Armaf, I'm getting 12 plus hours easily. All right. So that's kind of how it scales up in terms of, the overall longevity. Now, if I'm going to give the Game of Spades High Roller like a closeness rating on a scale from 1 to 10, this overall, I would say, is about like a 90% close to the original Creed. Like I said, it is much closer in the mid and the dry down than what it is in the opening. The opening, it is definitely different for sure, so far anyway. Now, I don't know if this bottle is going to, sort of change in terms of how that opening smells as it sort of maturates. But at least right now anyway, it is a little off in the opening. But once you kind of get to that transition point where like the ginger, the cinnamon, and the cardamom really start to come in, at that point, I would say is when this starts to become a lot closer to the original Creed, Absolu Aventus. All right. So, like I said, I would give this one about a 90% overall in terms of closeness. And then in terms of just my sort of overall rating, in terms of how I like this fragrance, I do like this one a lot, man. This is easily a 9 out of 10 for sure. Definitely intend to keep both this as well as the Armagh fragrance. I think both of these, even though they are based on the same scent profile, they are slightly different enough to where I could, justify keeping both of these for sure. I do think that the Game of Spades High Roller is the better value out of the two. The Club de Nuit Precieux for this 55 ml bottle normally runs like around $70, whereas the Game of Spades High Roller for 100 ml is about $80. So this is obviously the much better value, and it even comes closer, for most of the fragrance, to the original fragrance. All right. So that's my take on the High Roller. And then in terms of the Hawas Black, so I picked this fragrance up with the sort of expectation or the thought that this would be a Absolu Aventus inspiration. All right. And so as you can see, this fragrance, it comes in pretty much the same presentation that you get with the original Hawas, as well as Hawas Ice. As you can see, it kind of has like this sort of black and like rose gold sort of color scheme to it. All right, so you've got the name of the fragrance here on the front, Hawas Black Eau de Parfum. This is a 100 ml bottle. You've got that logo up top there, the ingredients and everything on the back, barcode on the bottom, and then on the side here, you have like the manufacture date. So this was manufactured August 8th of this year. All right, so let's go ahead and open this one up. And as you can see, it's got the same sort of presentation as the other Hawas bottles, except this one has like this sort of black sticker that covers the front and the back of the bottle. But you can still see the juice level from the side. So it's like this, kind of amber colored juice inside there. And you still get the same sort of heavy metal cap that you get with the other Rasasi fragrances. And I can't really tell if this is like just a black coated metal. I believe it is, as far as like the neck and everything goes. And then obviously the sprayer on this is very good, just like it is with the other Hawas fragrances. Now, for the Hawas Black, all right, and here actually what I'll do here is I'll actually pull up the notes of Hawas Black, because they do differ, from the original sort of Absolu Aventus. All right. And that is one thing that a lot of people sort of noticed initially was the notes on this particular fragrance. They were definitely, they were a lot different than what you would expect from what was supposed to have been like an Absolu Aventus inspiration. All right. All right, and so what we have here for the notes are in the top notes, we have pineapple, grapefruit, and bergamot. In the mid, you have cedarwood, jasmine, and patchouli. And then in the base, you have oak moss, amber, and woody notes. So after I had purchased this fragrance, I saw a lot of people saying that, hey, that note breakdown, it looks extremely similar to Nishani's Hachi vibe. So this can't be an Absolu Aventus inspiration. So that's what we're here to find out today. And what I can say for sure is, yeah, this is not really an Absolu Aventus inspiration at all. This is definitely like I would say at least about a 80% sort of Nishani Hachi vibe inspiration. There are definitely some differences to this fragrance. I mean, I guess you could sort of say that the sort of dark sort of dry down that you get with Absolu Aventus, you know, with the sort of patchouli, the sandalwood, the oak moss, those elements, they are in this fragrance also, but it doesn't really smell at any point in time, you know, in my opinion anyway, it doesn't ever really smell anything like Absolu Aventus. Even the way that the pineapple is done in this fragrance, it smells way more like Nishani's Hachi vibe. You know, if you're familiar with the way that the pineapple smells in Hachi vibe and the way that it smells in, you know, like the Aventus sort of DNA, whether it be the original Aventus or even Absolu Aventus, to me, the pineapple in Nishani's Hachi vibe is a lot more sort of thicker and denser and a lot more sweeter. You know, and it's a lot louder for sure in Hachi vibe. Whereas with the Absolu Aventus or even the original Aventus, it is nowhere near, you know, as loud as what it is, you know, in Hachi vibe. All right. So that's one main difference for sure that I can say, you know, is what you get. Now, also with this fragrance, in terms of like how it sort of performs, this fragrance does perform more along the lines of what Hachi vibe does as well. So Hachi vibe compared to Aventus, Hachi vibe is going to be a much more louder fragrance. You know, in terms of like how that fragrance projects compared to Creed, or Creed Aventus anyway, or even Absolu Aventus, Hachi vibe definitely, it blows both of those out of the water in terms of like its projection and even its longevity. It's just a much heavier, denser, and also in my opinion a more sort of mature type of fragrance. Now, Absolu Aventus is, you could say, a more mature kind of take on, you know, the original Aventus scent profile. In some, you know, in some ways, or maybe more sort of like a modern take on it. But this for sure is going to be a much more sort of mature style fragrance than both Absolu Aventus or even the original Aventus for sure. In my opinion, it doesn't really fit within the sort of Hawas line. You know, especially considering the way that the original Hawas smells as well as Hawas Ice. This is going to be way different than those two fragrances. And I mean, I would say for the most part, I feel like the sort of customer base for Hawas is more of like the younger crowd. This is not really going to appeal to most younger people at all. I would say this is going to be more of sort of like a 30 and up, you know, style fragrance. You know, whereas Hawas, obviously, I would gift that to like a 14-year-old or something like that wanted, you know, just a really nice smelling, mass appealing style fragrance. I think a 14-year-old teenager could wear Hawas, you know, as much as an adult can as well. But I just think that the Hawas line is, you know, what they've built with that is more kind of geared towards, you know, the younger crowd. And again, this fragrance is definitely not that. All right. So yeah, if you're looking for this to be like a, you know, Absolu Aventus inspiration or alternative or even like a twist, it's not really that at all. This is, like I said, it's going to be more kind of like 80% you know, Nishani's Hachi vibe, but with a more sort of darker twist to it. All right. So like I said, this is not going to be as bright as Hachi vibe in the opening, and it's darker to me than what Hachi vibe is in the dry down as well. The oak moss and the patchouli in this are just definitely, they're kind of dialed up a little bit more than what I remembered from Hachi vibe. Now obviously I don't have my bottle of Hachi vibe right now to kind of do like a side-by-side comparison with, to give you my, you know, give you an exact, you know, sort of comparison. But I mean, I wore that fragrance for several years, so I mean, I'm pretty familiar with it, and I can tell that this is definitely earthier, darker. Yeah, just overall, it's slightly different than, you know, what Hachi vibe is. But like I said, it's going to be about 80% close for the most part, you know, to what Hachi vibe is. Now, like I said before, this does definitely perform like Hachi vibe. So you're easily going to get over 12 hours for sure of total longevity with this fragrance. And it is going to, you know, project pretty beast mode for at least like the first 3.5 hours or so, 3.5 to 4 hours. So it is a very, very strong fragrance in that regard. So if you're looking for, you know, a cheap sort of twist on Nishani's Hachi vibe that doesn't smell, you know, cheap, I would definitely recommend that for you. I would recommend this Hawas Black. I'm just a little bit underwhelmed because I was, like I said, expecting this to be more of like an Absolu Aventus inspiration. And I was expecting this to maybe, you know, possibly one up the Club de Nuit Precieux, you know, in terms of that sort of Absolu Aventus scent profile. All right. So that's my take on that's my take on Rasasi's Hawas Black. Like I said, closeness wise, it's not even really close enough for me to really even give it a rating, you know, as far as closeness to Absolu Aventus, because it's just not really that scent profile at all. And then, I mean, if I'm going to give this one an overall rating, this one for me, I would say is like a 7 out of 10. Not because, you know, it smells bad or anything like that. I think just at this point, I'm a little bit kind of over the sort of Hachi vibe scent profile. You know, so I mean, this fragrance is not necessarily a fragrance that I intend to really wear that much. I definitely intend to wear, you know, something like the Game of Spades High Roller and the Club de Nuit Precieux, you know, a lot more than I would the Hawas Black. All right. So that's my take on these fragrances, man. Let me know in the comments if you all actually have any or all of these fragrances. And if so, what do you all think about them? Do you all agree with my assessment of these fragrances? Also, do you love these fragrances? Do you hate them? Are they just okay? Let me know in the comments. And also, if you're brand new to the channel, do me a favor, go ahead and subscribe. And again, that's Jamar from Vegas Scents. I'll see you on the next video.